We all remember Fight Club, right? Cheering for Tyler Durden, the anarchist who wanted to burn the whole system down. But fast forward only 1 year later, and we found ourselves cheering for a guy who became that machine's most polished gear. I'm talking about Patrick Bateman, the guy we spent the last 20 years celebrating in the completely wrong context. We turned this hollow man into a Sigma male icon, memed his business cards, treated his emptiness like an aspiration. We fell for the punchline without ever getting the joke. We looked at this walking warning label and said, yeah, I'll have what he's having, ultimately becoming the joke ourselves. So how do we get Bateman so backwards? And what does our misreading say about us? On the surface, American Psycho follows Patrick Bateman, a wealthy investment banker in 1980s New York who is obsessed with status, the right business cards, the right reservations, the right appearance. But beneath this perfect exterior, he's descending into violent psychosis. The plot, to the extent there is one, follows his dual life. By day, he's just another suit in the world of interchangeable yuppies. By night, he's a serial killer. Yet the film constantly blurs the line between reality and fantasy, leaving us to wonder how much is actually happening versus what's in his head. It's crucial to understand this premise isn't the point, it's the setup. The real story isn't about the murders, it's about the emptiness that drives them. But how did this specific story, with its razor-sharp satire, even make it to the screen? To understand how this film backfired on us so spectacularly, we need to go back to its controversial origins. When Bret Easton Ellis's novel hit shelves in 1991, it wasn't just a book, it was a cultural hand grenade. Critics called it morally bankrupt, bookstores were picketed, and Hollywood's immediate reaction was unanimous. This is Unfilmable. So for nearly a decade, American Psycho drifted through development hell. Even Oliver Stone was attached at one point, envisioning a much more straightforward, macho thriller. But then came Mary Harron, a journalist turned filmmaker who'd cut her teeth writing for punk magazines. To her, the story wasn't a slasher film. No, she saw it as a dark comedy. Harron's vision wasn't just about tone, it was about perspective. She brought on co-writer Guinevere Turner, and together they sharpened the story, drawing out a feminist critique buried in Ellis's hyper-masculine prose. The casting for the lead role was going to be crucial. The studio wanted a bankable star, specifically Leonardo DiCaprio at the peak of his fame, post-Titanic. But Harron fought for a then unknown Welsh actor named Christian Bale. To her, Patrick Bateman wasn't a heartthrob, but rather a, quote, young executive in a nightmare. She needed someone who could embody that specific, terrifying emptiness. But a performance this nuanced needs the right world to live in. So let's look at how they built Bateman's cage. Director of photography Andrzej Sikula didn't just light scenes, he built visual arguments within them. For example, let's look at Bateman's apartment. It's really not a home, it's a showroom. Every surface is cold, hard, reflective. Glass, steel, white marble, materials that don't absorb life, but rather simply bounce it back. There's nothing personal here because there's no person here. The camera treats Bateman's life like a museum exhibit. Wide, static shots make his world feel vast but empty. Deep focus forces us to see every meticulous arranged detail, the perfectly aligned stereo components, the business cards presented like religious artifacts. Even the sound design is part of this aesthetic. Listen to how a business card thwip cuts through the air like a weapon. In between Huey Lewis tracks is deafening silence. And speaking of Huey Lewis, this is where Harron's dark comedy angle really sings. The infamous hip-to-be-square murder scene isn't shocking despite the cheerful pop music, it's shocking because of it. The film isn't glorifying violence so much as it's showing us how we package even the most horrific nihilism in cheerful, marketable wrapping paper. A world this sterile and performative demands a very specific kind of story, and a very specific kind of person to live in it. That story deliberately rejects everything we expect from traditional narrative. There's no 3-act structure here, and there's absolutely zero character growth. Just a cascading series of vignettes that form a numbing, repetitive loop. We move from business lunches to gym sessions, to nightclubs, to murders, with no real distinction between them. The film makes you feel the soul-crushing monotony of Bateman's existence. The violence is his way of breaking that monotony, only it eventually starts to feel like just another item on his to-do list. All of this is held together by Bateman's voiceover, one of cinema's great unreliable narrators. He confesses to horrific crimes in the same flat, clinical tone you'd use to read a restaurant menu, and the world around him, it just shrugs. At one point, his secretary listens to a detailed murder confession and thinks it's a joke. This creates the film's central, brilliant ambiguity. Are we watching reality, or the pathetic fantasy of a man so desperate to matter that he imagines himself as a monster? Which brings us to the man at the center of this void. And what a performance it is. Christian Bale doesn't just play Patrick Bateman, he builds him from the outside in and embodies him. Every movement is precise and calculated. The way he handles a business card, the fixed smile that never reaches his eyes, the voice that's a flat, effectless drone. He isn't so much playing a person, he's playing the performance of a person. There's this darkly funny contrast in how seriously he takes his elaborate skincare routine, while his soul is visibly rotting on the inside. The ice mask, the facial steamer, he's treating vain surface-level symptoms, while the cancer of emptiness grows unchecked underneath. This is the same kind of performative perfection we see in modern influencer culture, just with more blood. And he's not alone in his emptiness. The supporting cast are all hollow mirrors. The running gag of mistaken identity isn't just a joke, it's the film's core social critique. In this world, identity is completely fluid, based on interchangeable suits and restaurant opinions. Bateman isn't a singular monster, he's the logical endpoint of his environment. But what does all this surface and performance actually mean? The film's answer is ultimately devastatingly simple. There is no man underneath the suit. This is the true core horror of American Psycho. Patrick Bateman isn't a person. He's a collection of branded products, curated restaurant reviews, and violently adopted opinions. He's a walking void trying to fill itself with status, with things, even with violence. And nothing works. This is why the business card scene is more terrifying than any murder. That scene isn't about stationery, it's about a man's entire sense of self-being demolished by a better font. His violence isn't about power, it's the desperate flailing of someone trying to feel anything at all. The tragedy is that the movie looks as seductive as the lifestyle it mocks, and the system around them is just as hollow. At one point, Bateman desperately tries to confess to his lawyer. He's literally screaming, "I'm a violent psychopath," and the response is, "Nice card though." The system isn't ignoring his crimes, it's fundamentally incapable of processing anything that isn't a status symbol. We aren't supposed to admire him, we're supposed to recognize ourselves. This brings us to the most disturbing question of all. If the film's message was this clear, how did we get it so wrong? Well, we got it wrong because, culturally, we became the very people the film was satirizing. Look at our modern landscape, the Sigma grind set, the obsession with personal branding, the morning routine videos that go viral, the way we started living our lives online. Patrick Bateman's life was one big emptiness, and we've turned that emptiness into a flex. We're not just missing the point, we're actively proving it. The ultimate irony is that Bateman has become the ultimate luxury good. We aren't just quoting him, we're consuming him. His aesthetic has been stripped of its meaning and sold back to us as an aspirational lifestyle, proving the film's argument that capitalism can commodify even its own critique. The film showed that in a world saturated with consumerism, even identity would become a product. And that's exactly what happened. We're all curating our own versions of Bateman's persona. Polished surfaces hiding uncertain interiors. The horror is no longer on the screen, it's in our feeds. So where does that leave us? If we fully embrace the very emptiness the film warned us about, is there a way out? The true tragedy of American Psycho isn't that Bateman is a monster, it's that he's a ghost. The film's most heartbreaking moment comes when he tries to confess, not to find forgiveness, but simply to be seen, to have his existence acknowledged somehow. And that system can't even give him that. He's trapped in the performance so perfect, it's rendered him invisible. This brings us back to Fight Club. Tyler Durden offered the fantasy of breaking free from the system, but Patrick Bateman shows us the reality of what happens when you become the system. One promises revolution from an empty world, the other reveals the quiet horror of loneliness when perfect conformity exists. This is what stays with you after the credits roll. Not the gore, but that profound, palpable loneliness. We keep returning to this film because we recognize that same fear in ourselves. That fear that maybe our own individual lives are also one big performance. That beneath the curated photos and the status symbols, we might also be disappearing. The film's final line, "This is not an exit," isn't just about Bateman. It's about all of us. There's no easy way out of this performance culture because we've built our identities on it. The horror has become our habitat. Which brings me to my final thought about what this all means. Not just for how we watch movies, but for how we live. The most dangerous thing we can do is mistake a warning for a manual. American Psycho wasn't trying to create a generation of Batemans. It was trying to prevent one. The film's enduring power lies in its uncomfortable mirror, forcing us to confront how much of our own identity is performance and how much is real. If this made you see Bateman, or maybe even yourself, a little differently, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What parts of his performance have we normalized in our own lives? And if you're interested in more films that aren't what they seem, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and remember, the real horror isn't on the screen, it's what we choose to worship.